Good afternoon. My name is Lisa Daisel. I'm from the Unisa Directorate for Counselling and Career Development. A very warm welcome to all of you who have joined us for this afternoon session. Just some announcements before we start. You will note that your microphone and your camera are currently disabled, but we will enable your microphone during the event, during the Q&A session. We do, however, encourage you that if you have any questions or comments or thoughts as you are listening to the presentation, please don't hesitate to ask those in the chat or in the Q&A on Teams. We just ask that you don't share any personal information. That would be your email address, your telephone number in the chat or the Q&A. That is just to protect your privacy. We are recording the session and you will receive an email with a link to the recording. Alternatively, it will also be available in the MS Teams meeting under chats after we've ended this event. Now, our speaker for this afternoon is Ms. Boipelo Soko, and she will be talking about from application to offer, navigating the modern recruitment journey. Due to some other commitments that she had, she did indicate to us that she will join a couple of minutes late. So what I'm going to do just in terms of our program is that the announcements that we normally do at the end of the presentation, I will do now, while we just give Boipelo some time to join us for the formal presentation. So on that note, let me just skip through these. So those who haven't attended these sessions before, we always share links to the PNET Grad Pack as well as the Grad X book that I will show next. Both of these books are available free of charge. You can download it using the link or then the QR code that's now currently on your screen. The PNET Grad Pack specifically focuses on questions around interview skills, CV writing, how to clean up your social media, but also negotiating your salary and so forth. So a lot of tips that you can use to manage your job search and your career development process. And then the Grad Next book was specifically designed for final year students, but anyone can find value from the different articles in the book. Again, it focuses on CV writing, interview skills, networking, but there are also articles in the book about personal financial management and even some tips in terms of starting your own business. Then, as you are sitting here this afternoon, you might know that we normally publish information about our future events on the My Unisa events calendar. I will also post the links to register for our next events in the chat. So on Thursday this week, we will have a seminar that will focus on exploring career opportunities for human sciences. Then on the 12th of August, the similar seminar, but it will be for the science, engineering and technology students. Then next week, Wednesday on the 13th, we've got a session about teaching English in China. Any student is welcome to attend any of these sessions. That's not focused specifically on, for example, human science or China, or then the 19th of August on the agricultural sciences. Even though you might be studying, let's say, for example, a BA degree, there might still be valuable or useful information either for yourself or other people related to the other topics that I've also mentioned. Then you're more than welcome to contact us, either Mrs. Mandu Makanya, my colleague, or myself by email if you have any questions about these events or if you would like to make suggestions for future career events. Then just getting in touch with Counselling and Career Development, you're welcome to send us an email. Our email address is counselling@unisa.ac.za. You could also book an online appointment with one of my colleagues, student counselors. These online appointments take place on Microsoft Teams, or you could also contact a counsellor at any of the Unisa regional offices if you'd prefer to have an in-person counselling appointment. Then on our website at unisa.ac.za/counselling, we publish several self-help resources that you can use for your career development, but also for your academic as well as your personal development. And then on our YouTube channel, excuse me, we have published recordings of events such as the one that you are attending this afternoon. So please also make some time to go and see which recordings are available so that you can catch up on what you've missed out on. So on that note, I'm just going to check in if Boipelo is with us. Boipelo, I see that you are here.
Yes, I am.
Very welcome to you. You are just in time. So before we hand over to you, I'm just going to introduce you. So let me just go back. Okay, so our speaker, Boipelo, is currently a talent manager at Baker McKenzie. Previously, she served as a senior HR business partner at Cliff, Decker and Hofmeyr, one of South Africa's largest corporate and commercial law firms. She is passionate about organizational well-being, young talent development, leadership training, continuous learning, and empowering young people to recognize and achieve their potential. And in addition to that, I could also say that she is passionate about Unisa students. So a very warm welcome to you, Boipelo.
I am indeed. Thank you. Thank you, Lisa, and good afternoon to everyone. Thank you for being here with us today. I'm very excited to go through this topic with you. When I share my screen, I will switch off my videos, but I encourage you to engage, ask questions. I will be asking you some questions as well. I want to hear your thoughts. What are some of the issues that you're dealing with? As in when we see questions on the chat, I'll try to address them through the presentation or at the end. So make the most of the session and let's get straight into it. Okay, so applications from recruitment, from application to recruitment. Okay, so again, a welcome to all of you Unisa students. I just want to highlight that as remote learners, you bring unique strengths like self-discipline and adaptability. And today we're going to explore how to navigate the recruitment journey and leverage those strengths to stand out. Yeah. So what got you here won't get you there. It's a beautiful quote there by Marshall Goldsmith. And what it emphasizes for me is that the only constant in life is change. Therefore, you should be both excited about that uncertainty, as well as prepping for what that then means for you, right? It's also then remembering that within that change, it's not just change for you as prospective employees, but also change for us as employers. And therefore, there's a need for the entire ecosystem to constantly be adapting to what those changes look like. Looking at recruitment and the journey, why does this matter, right? The job market is extremely competitive. It's constantly evolving. And as employers, we're looking beyond your qualifications. We want you and us to also understand that the recruitment journey empowers you then to stand out. So as Unisa students, some of the things that you would want to show right from the get-go is that you're juggling multiple responsibilities. You're building your resilience, And then, of course, I want you to then be asking yourself, what do you think employers value most in graduates today? I'm going to pause because I would like to see some comments on that. The question being, what do you think employers value most in graduates or new employees? I'm just going to pause because I'd like to just see a little bit of your engagement before we continue. And you can just populate your comments on your chats. Thank you. I see some skills. Thanks, Lisa, for reposting the question. Right, definitely competence. authenticity. I love this. I'm already seeing some themes or similar responses coming through. Right, ethics, dedication, 100%. Obviously, we want to see experience, but in the question, if you think about graduates don't always necessarily have competence or the experience to speak to a role that one is employing for. But definitely your attitude, your softer skills, your ability to work independently and in a team, and 100% your ethics and integrity. Those are things that you want to see in a potential employee, right? I love that one. Sonwabiso, are you able to grow the company and bring value? And we'll touch on that in a little bit once you're actually going into the recruitment process. Let's kind of look at how the process works out, right? So you start with your awareness. So what are the roles that you're interested in? Where do you even find those roles? So job boards, career fairs, through networking, sessions such as this, and I'm going to show you why. And then you look at your actual application. So what is it that you are putting out there? So if you think about some of the responses you're posting on the chat, how do you reflect that? How do you demonstrate that within your application process? It can be quite difficult. Your skills and your experience are obviously seen in the CV, but other things such as your integrity and your ethics can be really difficult to articulate, even if you're putting them out in a cover letter. Those would be some of the things that we hopefully then see in the fourth stage of your interview. In the screening process, so your AT is an application tracking system. So that's generally what companies use to filter through CVs, and it can be anything from LinkedIn to the generic send an email to a specific email address, or a system like we use, a system called Avatar, others called Salesforce. There's quite a few, but I recognize that a lot of people get stuck between points 2 and 3. And if you're stuck between point 2 and 3, point 4 and 5 are almost feel like crazy mountains to you, right? Insurmountable mountains. But when you're able to articulate what it is you think you bring to the table, and that's Sonwabiso's point, what do you think you bring to the table? What value do you think you're going to bring? You are then able to zoom through those last 2 points of interviewing and the offer stage, because you then know how to streamline your CV for the right types of roles, for the roles that you are interested in, and making sure that the right opportunities are then directed to you, or then find you through, like we said in point 1, the job board, career fairs, and especially through your networking. So yes, honesty and kindness, absolutely. Love those as attitudes, as attributes that one should have, but very difficult to articulate in a CV or cover letter. Those are things that you're wanting to definitely show within the screening and the interviewing process. Okay, so maybe here I'd like to pause and just ask you, where do you think you're most challenged within this funnel? Is it at point 1 in terms of finding where to look for roles? Or is it within the application stage in terms of the documents that you've put together and how you've put them together? Is it in submitting your CVs, but then not necessarily making it through into the next stage? Or is it at interview? Do you find that you perhaps don't interview too well? Because interviewing is also actually a skill, and it's a skill that constantly needs to be, refined. Or is it in that last stage of offer and onboarding? Yeah. I'm just going to pause and just look at some of the responses here. 1 and 2. Interesting. Okay. It looks like 1 and 2. Shante, 2, 3, 4, 2, 3, and 4. That's a lot. It's almost all the stages. So 1 and 2, okay. it's an interesting point that one is coming up, and I think in one it's then understanding where are you then looking for roles, and where should you be looking for roles? If it's not on the job boards, even on the Unisa site, then which websites are you using? I think there's a assumption that because we're always talking about LinkedIn, that people should only be using LinkedIn. But, you know, there are other sites such as, I'm just going to post it here, like something like Indeed, right? Indeed pulls from other websites and post jobs that's picked up from other sites. So are you on a site like Indeed, on something like a PNet as an example? Yes, sorry, Sunday, I see you and I just posted the same thing. And of course, importantly, company websites. Quite often, roles that are sitting on company websites are not necessarily always pulling onto things like LinkedIn or even Indeed. Where you're seeing roles that you assume are scams, I cannot stress enough the importance of actually going onto a company website and figuring out, is this role real? To the extent that that role doesn't necessarily have the company name or the company detail, then Google the spec itself as they've put it out. Google the spec and see, does the spec exist anywhere else? Because if it's been posted on a public platform, it will exist if you then go search for it. What they would do on something like an Indeed or PNet, which is picking up from other websites, they won't necessarily write the name of the company. But like I said, the spec itself, they can't change the spec. Now, if you're Googling the spec and the spec doesn't exist elsewhere, or the spec is asking for things like asking you to send money, or like my niece at some point actually had an issue where it seemed like she was consistently getting emails asking her to complete a form and then submit like a criminal clearance, as well as her ID copy and things that are actually quite confidential and only really get asked in stages 4 and 5. She was being asked at stage 1, literally stage 1, because this wasn't even her really applying, because she you know, she didn't always have an idea of where the CV or where her email had been picked up on. If you were getting emails like that, then you know, like, this is quite suspicious. So thank you to this last person who just posted in her finding. Job posts, even on LinkedIn, can be suspicious. So your responsibility at stage 1 is to do a little bit of extra research to double check, is this a real role? And if you have the details of the company, go to the company website. If there's an email address, check, does this email address make sense? Is it a wipilosoko@gmail.com? Like, but yet she's working at a Baker McKenzie. Is it at does the phone number is the phone number real if you call it? Is there even a phone number? So just always do your research. But I would say, as a point, just maybe as the thing on step 1, make sure that you're going onto the company website. I see a Sandra says, so even when you're applying on company websites, they require your ID. So if you're on the company website, you at least know where you've submitted your info, Asanda, as opposed to you've sent it to a random contact or random email address that you're not even sure exists anywhere else. So you want to go onto the company website and just double check. Some companies, especially small and medium companies, may not necessarily have a very extensive company website, but then you can then double check them through things like LinkedIn. You can check where else do they have a digital footprint. In the same way as you will have a digital footprint, be it your LinkedIn or your CV on a site like Biz Community, on a site like Career Junction, etc. You want to double check what their credentials are, who are the people working at those companies. So do that research, especially if you're struggling with step 1. Step 2, I think this is why you're on sessions such as this one. And maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago, we did we had a whole session on updating your CV, and last week we did another one on LinkedIn. So I will assume that the recordings of this, if not recordings of this, then you could find the presentation. Like, I'm going to send you my actual slide deck. You can go through those as well. And of course, using the career services team to find out if they can assist you with helping to strengthen your CV a bit, maybe just having it reviewed. So that's the one part. And then so far as screening is concerned, I think the screening is difficult because key in the screening part is resilience for rejection. And rejection, honestly, guys, it's just part of the process. Last night, I probably reviewed just over 100 CVs. Of those 100 CVs, this is for a specific role I'm interviewing for right now, recruiting for right now. Of those 100 CVs, I shortlisted it down to 11. I'll see 3 people today. I might not necessarily see all 11 by the end of the week, and certainly not all 11 will make it through to the next stage with the team. That's just part of how the process is. What's important is that you don't give up on the process, because I will assume it's important to you that you get your career to where you need it to be. So you have to keep applying. You have to keep doing the research. And Megan, like you said, you're sending out the CV to so many companies, handing it out personally, and you won't always get feedback, because sometimes you've done nothing wrong. There was just a stronger applicant, right? And there was nothing that we could have said. If you had put in the specific line in your cover letter, then this is the reason why we would have called you. Sometimes just because Tepiso did something on her CV that just demonstrated that she has the necessary skills or the necessary level of experience, or actually there's a way in which she articulated a cover letter that resonated with us, and so we want to see her. So you just keep trying, because it's important to you to get that role. So yeah, just keep doing the research, keep applying. Even on the government website, I saw somebody mention that one as well. You have to keep applying because it's the role that you want, right? Yeah, the PSA. You have to keep applying and understanding that what is it that they're looking for within the specific applications. Okay. Let's go maybe onto then crafting that CV, and this is that stage 2 that some of you highlighted as an area, as a challenging area. Again, as far as possible, you do want to craft a winning application. You want to try to tailor your CV a little bit to the roles that you're applying for. And I would say here, maybe what you want to do is, if there are 5 jobs that you're going to apply for, there may be 2 that are your actual ideal roles. Those 2, put a little bit more effort into them than you would maybe the other 3. The other 3, you may send like a generic CV in which you're saying something like, or a rather generic cover letter in which you're saying something like, I'm interested in this company because, let me just see. So I'm interested in this company because I have this specific and whatever XY kind of skills that you have. I'm driven. I've got really great time management skills, as exemplified by how I've balanced my academics with working or volunteering part-time, as well as managing personal, no, maybe not personal, as well as managing additional responsibilities with my, let's say, my study group and the like. So what you basically want to do is, in your cover letter, even though you have a generic one, you have a generic one that kind of like speaks to these are the skills that I have, And these skills are transferable to any employer, right? Irrespective of who that employer is and what it is that they do. But if you are, so like things like saying, I'm extremely curious. I have a high learning agility. I'm adaptable. Those skills, no matter where you go, are skills that anyone is interested in. But if you then are looking at your ideal employer or the ideal role, then you want to change up your cover letter a little bit to specifically speak to that role and that company. So if you're using the same example of I'm curious, have a high learning agility, and I'm adaptable, what you would want to say is I'm adaptable because I see that in your organization, graduates rotate every 6 months. This is something that I think, with my high learning agility, will enable me to adapt quite quickly into those different rotations, etc. If you just switch up a little bit of what you're already saying for your dream employer, then they already kind of see like, okay, this person's actually done more research than the average. And like I said, if you're sending like 10 CVs, it's probably not practical to personalize for all the roles that you're applying for. If you have the capacity, if you have the time, absolutely do it. But if you don't, and you want to send out as many CVs as you can, so I've had instances of candidates saying, "I've got a spreadsheet, and in the spreadsheet, it's tableized in terms of these are all the employees that I've applied to. This is the industry. This is my comments in terms of the research I've done on them. This is what I have then said in my CV, my cover letter. This is the feedback so far. This is what's happening in my process." So if we think about that funnel again, and then then they're actually tracking every little detail of the recruitment process across the board. And not everyone works that way when they're submitting applications. So you may be online on LinkedIn right now, see something and go, "Oh, this is nice. Easy apply." Press there on LinkedIn. Easy apply picks up the latest CV that you had saved on LinkedIn, actual CV, so not necessarily your profile, your actual CV. Because you can upload that onto LinkedIn, and then that's what gets sent out when you're doing an easy apply. The recruiter on the other side, that's what they pick up. There are instances where you've decided that you don't want to actually attach your actual CV, and you're hoping that they'll look at your LinkedIn profile, almost like the downloaded version of that. Then that's what they see. What you want to do though is ensure that the CV that you do attach, and I encourage you to always attach the actual CV. You want to make sure that it is updated and as far as possible. If there are gaps on your CV, so if you had worked in 2020 and 2021, 2022 you stopped working. 2022 you stopped working, but then you enrolled at Unisa in 2023. It means you have that 1 year gap. Don't just leave that gap there and hope that you will answer it in an interview. What you may want to do is maybe think about, what did you do in that year? Was there anything, because surely you did something with your time every day for like 12 months. And if there were things where you're like, actually, on weekends over that time, I was volunteering at, I don't know, you were volunteering at your church, or you were volunteering at a home, or you were assisting, even if it's informally, you were assisting someone with, let's say you're an accounting student, you were assisting somebody with their books, right? Or you were tutoring, or you were doing additional studies, but maybe not formal studies. So maybe you were on LinkedIn Learning, and the like. Those are the you as a quick line. You just want to add that, because you don't want that gap to sit there like, you don't want that gap to sit there like there was absolutely nothing that you were doing. And what it speaks to in saying it, yes, in that year I didn't have a formal job and I wasn't formally studying, because maybe you're waiting to finish off, maybe to start the year you're waiting to start off the year and you now had the funds. What you want to do is show that in that year, I was still invested in my own development. I was still invested in learning. I was still invested in growing as a person. I was still invested in contributing contributing and being of value to society in general, even if it wasn't necessarily aligned to where you ultimately want to take your career. All it shows is that there's a level of determination, there's a level of there's a level of determination, there's a level of self-development, and there's a level of like, I want more for myself, that you will ultimately then pour back into a potential employer. So those are the things that you want to focus on, even in your CV and your cover letter. So I'm going to pause a little bit on this presentation because I want to show you something else, and this actually answers the question that Nwanji asked, which electronic CV template is suitable to use. You can use so many different ones, but I had one here. So if you go on Microsoft Word and you just go on CV templates, you can use that. It's got quite a few, but I'm not going to show you Microsoft's one. I'm going to show you a different one that I know most students love to use. I'm going to show you one that most students I know love to use because, you know, it looks nice. It's colorful, etc. So let's go here. So this here is Canva. I would like to think that most students are familiar with Canva because, you know, most people don't like to use PowerPoint anymore for their presentations, but PowerPoint's perfectly fine. So I've already gone into Canva and I went into templates. As you can see, these are CV templates. But what I love about Canva, and this is where it's different to something like Microsoft Word, if you went into their CV templates, or if you even went on LinkedIn and used that template. The beauty of something like Canva is it starts generating what type of CVs you could be looking for, right? So I'm going to say CV template for students. Okay. Already so many different types. Of course, Canva is also paid, but only if you're going to use the profiles that are, you know, that require you to pay for them or to rather have a subscription. But there's so many other free ones, right? And you can then go into this and kind of look at what is it that works for me? What is it that will speak to what my skill sets are, right? So we're going to let's use like a super, super simple one. Atandile, you are running your own business. That is a skill set. You definitely want to post that on your CV. So yes, Ndlovu, Canva, you can pay, but there are lots of free services on it. So this, for example, is free, right? So these designs are free. And if you just look at how simple this CV is here, this CV, if you think about this profile, this would be the same kind of profile that you would use on something like LinkedIn. And if you go on LinkedIn, it will help you generate a profile or an about statement, which you can then copy and paste here. Your contact details, I always like a little bit of like, you know, these are little emoji things. And then simple things, your work experience. And if you haven't had any, but you've run your own business, you can put that here, right? Your education, you're at Unisa. I would suggest that you never use the acronym, just write the full thing. High school. Also, if you're putting high school, guys, please, don't put in the subjects you did in high school. Once you're at varsity, I promise you nobody's interested in what subjects you did at high school. To the extent that an employer does need to know what you did in high school, chances are they're going to ask you for your a copy of your matric certificate, and then they can actually see what subject you did. So don't take up space unnecessarily, putting in lots and lots of modules that if somebody is going to ask for your transcripts, we'll see them anyway. What you may want to do, and I saw a question there about are achievements quantifiable? How do you quantify them? What you may want to do is, if you're saying I'm at Unisa, let's say, for example, you are third year. Over the course of your 3 years, you've had, it's 8 distinctions. You may want to put that here, as opposed to putting a section about achievements. And this is, I'm using this template for people that are worried that they don't really have a lot of experience. And so, you know, kind of want to still be competitive. Language, this I would suggest that you rather put in here, because as you develop, you want things like this, computer skills and language, to kind of move into this section, because those are not necessarily things that are really going to change. But if you speak 3 languages, speak 3 languages. If you add 1 more language in time, you'll just write, like, there'll be no, it will never be more comprehensive than saying you did Spanish, you did Sesotho, you did Zulu, English, Afrikaans, etc. Your computer skills, yes, here you may add them, but if you're, for example, a marketing student, then you'd want to keep your computer skills here, because there'll be programs that you use that speak to the skill set that is required for a marketing student based on the kind of role that they will then have, right? So you'd put that here. Volunteer experience, like I touched on earlier, you leave that. This is a simple CV, guys. Simple, it's not complicated, straight to the point. Instead of student, for those of you that were in my LinkedIn session last week, you may want to change and say BCom student / aspiring marketer, just using the same example. So that's what you'd want to do. But if you have a lot of experience, let's look for another free one. If you have a lot of experience, then this is, and again, this is the question around how do you quantify achievements, then you may want to then look at focusing a little bit around projects. And again, if you've had a gap here, you may also want to touch on this heading, projects, as opposed to specifically saying, you know, this was the work that I did. You're a student, so if you've had research experience, and if you're applying maybe even for a bursary or sponsorship or funding of any sort, this is where you may want to include that. So, and notable awards, if you were in Dean's List, if you were on, there's that other one that's quite popular with students as well, Golden Key, etc. These are some of the things that you would then want to add onto your CV. And what you want to do here is also then look at, and this is the next slide on my presentation. Let's go CV template. Now it's disappeared, that popped up earlier. Yeah, ATS friendly. And we touched on ATS because some of you said you're struggling with the 3rd point, which is screening. This is a nice one, it's a marketing one. So some of you had mentioned that you're struggling with ATSs because in an application tracking system, it's picking up keywords. So you should then be looking at what is on the job description and how is it aligned with what's in my CV. Again, these are now the roles that you really want, the roles that you're going to spend a little bit more time with in terms of your CV, your cover letter, and how and you know, registering yourself on a company website. This is what you then what you want to focus on. So here, Jonathan, right? Digital marketing. Chances are the role that he's applying for is a digital marketing role. So here in your case, you would have said 3rd year BCom student / digital aspiring digital marketer, right? Or aspiring to be in digital marketing. What that does for the ATS is it already picks up that this person is got 2 keywords that were necessary for the role that has been advertised. All you're trying to do is get your CV over into the next stage. So you are then going to look at keywords that speak to that role. So we'll come back to sharing. If you guys can tell me, if somebody can just confirm, what are you seeing now? Is my screen still on Canva or has it come up to the presentation?
We're seeing your presentation.
Perfect. Thanks. Thank you, Lisa. So here you want to then focus on, okay, what are the keywords that are required or that are picked up in the role that has been advertised? You want to keep it simple. So Microsoft or PDF, nothing more than that. You definitely don't want it to be a, you definitely don't want it to be something like a PowerPoint. I know some people use, funnily enough, do use PowerPoint as their base and then save their documents as that. You don't want it to be too creative. You want it to be able to fit into like the very simple system, so that the system is able to pick up the format of your CV and probably auto-populate your CV directly onto that system as well. And I know it can be frustrating because sometimes you're like, I've already submitted my CV and now the system is also asking me to retype my CV. Just do it, guys. If it's the role that you want and that's how the company wants you to submit your documents, do that. I touched on avoid acronyms as far as possible. So yes, we might say you're at Unisa, but on your CV, you want it to be clear that you're at the University of South Africa. And then as far as possible, again, tailor your application. I'm going to pause here because there are actually quite a few questions on this point. Okay, so presenting work experience that isn't long enough. So you work for 4 or 5 months. Okay, so Linda, let's assume this was in that 1 year. It's in that 2023 gap year or 2022 gap year that I touched on earlier. If in that gap year you had 2 contract roles, one was 4 months, one was 5 months, then you just put it as such. You'll say agency 1, January to April, and the other one was from August to December. Put it as such. But if in that gap you only had one contract role that you did, then what I would suggest you do, and this is a little bit of gaming on the system, what I would suggest you do is that you then go, was that agency, whatever agency name, and then just say 2022. Just say 20, don't put in the dates. Don't specify how long it was. What you want to do is explain that in the interview that, oh no, I was actually there on a contract role, and the contract was finished, right? Because I know in some industries, having done a lot of contract roles can almost be a negative, because then it can raise the question of how is it that you're not having necessarily a permanent role? How are you getting into these roles, but they're not being offered a permanent role? Are they offering other people permanent roles, but you're not necessarily cutting it? So it's also to understanding your industry a little bit. In other places, you could have been doing contracts because that's just the nature of. So if you, for example, on the Yes campaign, right, the one by government, if you want Yes campaign, that's a very specific 12-month period. That's it. Once you're done, you're done. And you can't do that again. So if you were Yes for 12 months and then you went into a different employer for like 5 months and they're like, you have to then think about how do you structure it so that you're showing that you continue to develop skills, but there were circumstances outside of your control that resulted in you only being able to be employed on a contractual basis. To David's question, okay, so being relevant when applying for a job when you have so many different courses. Okay, that's a good one. Okay, David, what you want to do is maybe let me. Okay, I'm going to answer David's question with an example, and I'll show you in a little bit. Let me quickly jump onto Chinoa's question. Should we include internships? Yes, yes, yes. Please include your internships, include your volunteer work, especially if they contribute to the field that you studied for, and and I can tell you, we care. Most places care because we want to see how you're building your skill set towards that. There's an example I'm going to speak to, actually, and it speaks to both your questions. Irrelevant experience, or what you consider to be irrelevant experience. There's no such thing. There's no such thing. What you may want to do is take some things out because it's probably making your CV longer than it needs to be, or it's probably resulting in your application being declined because it doesn't necessarily speak to the requirements, right? And then quickly on Marilyn's question, yes, if you're au pairing for 10 years, you've got 10 years in the States, Marilyn. You can't not have that on your CV. You were traveling. I mean, you have exposure and understanding of different cultures, people of different backgrounds, etc. That again also is a skill set you want to show that, and that's a transferable skill set, right? It may not necessarily be about au pairing, but what you want to say is even working with different types of families, patience of working with children. Those are skill sets, guys, that you cannot and you absolutely should not underestimate. There really is no such thing as work or studies that were a waste of time. It's only what matters is your understanding of how you put those different skill sets together. So and this is what then helps you then stand out in a process, because you're then building strong LinkedIn profile, which focuses on skills, which focuses on experience. You're networking with people. Marilyn, I would like to think that there are 1 or 2 families that you probably reach out to that could be really good references, or even the agency that you probably worked with, and maybe even people that could put you in touch with potential employers. You never want to assume that the experience that you've had was a waste of time, right? Marking for grade 12, that happens once a year. Put that, Hazel, I see people putting even things like they were, hell, I did this when I was younger. When you are working at during elections, you have to have people that are counting votes and the like. You put that in, guys. So I'm just quickly jumping onto LinkedIn. I want to show you a role. This role I looked at this morning. I just quickly Googled just a normal employer, Standard Bank. I looked at a graduate role that they have. This took me like 2 minutes, right? Remember I mentioned that easy apply? In easy apply, if you were to apply for this, it would ask you, do you want to use your current profile? Do you want to include, or do you want to include your CV? Like I said earlier, you definitely want to include your CV. But let's quickly look at this role, right? So of course they're going to start. They tell you why you want to apply to them. All companies do this. We want to sell you. We want to tell you what this is why we're great. And now your CV and your cover letter, it's this. It's your JD. It's you telling us why you were great, right? I just want to touch on something here in this role, and it touches on the 2 questions I think by David and Chinoa. I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly. So this is a learnership in the banking sector. They look at the skills, and these are the same things. Once you go into the ATS, it's going to ask you for. Driven, detail orientated, right? How do you demonstrate that you're driven? You demonstrate it through the story that you tell, guys, in your cover letter, right? So the lady who mentioned that she worked at agencies, 2 different agencies, you took those roles because you're driven, because you want to get in, you want to get into industry, right, Linda? This wasn't time wasted, right? You're detail orientated. I want to use somebody who actually touched on this in it. There's somebody who said that they run their own business. This is detail orientated. If you're a detail orientated person, if you're running your business, you have to be about your business. You paying attention to every single thing, how you're going to make money, how you're going to get your clients, etc., 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 right? Eager, that speaks to your attitude. Building your career, you're not wasting time. And that's why I mentioned if you've got a gap here, if you've got some time, like an extended period, right? So anything longer than 6 months is considered a gap. So shorter than 6 months, probably not. You could have been between your roles. So what were you doing to try to build your career? And this is your question here, David, around, was this a waste of time or not? There's no such thing as a waste of time. You were using all this information and hoping that it ultimately then, builds towards the career that you're working towards. So just because you've got you're studying B in information science, but you attended road construction learnership, what did you learn in that road construction learnership that you think will be of benefit to you within the information science spaces? You have to decide that. You have to have said, I've picked up, this is how I connected the dots in this time. 10 years later, David, you would have connected those dots slightly differently, right? Okay, bridging the gap, Okay, you'll also complete an occupational qualification, right? So they're already telling you you're going to learn. You want to show, like how I mentioned quite earlier, eager to learn, already speaks to that. You can touch on, I'm excited or eager, I'm using their own words, I'm eager to learn more about the bank, how the bank works, develop, get another qualification, etc. And remember, in the additional qualification you're getting, even if you don't finish however long this program of theirs is, you're still then walking out with a certificate as well as experience that you can then use elsewhere, right? And this is obviously to get your face accredited. So already then face accredited is an important thing within the financial services space, as well as even in insurance. So if you have that background, you're looking at that. Accounting, same, right? There's a point here that they've mentioned, and I think this now speaks to Marilyn's point around 10 years, as well as Chanel's point around internships. Experience required. Must not have a previous employment experience exceeding 2 years, or currently registered for any other internship program or enrolled in any other academic institution. So to the person who spoke about those 4 months, 5 months contracts, when you look at the CV, then when you look at this JD, what you then recognize as your advantage is the fact that you had 4 or 5 month contracts. Because now you're not going to say, I did a contract in 2021, and which is, like I said, basically gaming the system or gaming the recruiter into assuming that you did it for the year, right? Here you would specify that I was at agency 1 for 5 months, I was at agency 2 for 4 months, in total less than a year. Automatically, the system and the recruiter is like, okay, cool, this person has not exceeded the requirements that we're looking for. Sorry, I know I keep using David. It's just he had quite a few points on his question. But David, if you were in this road construction learnership, if that was a year, then you also automatically qualify, but not automatically qualify for this role just on this point around experience required, right? But if your internship was 2 years, there's a likelihood that they may say, you're not necessarily eligible because you've already done a 2-year learnership, and we're kind of looking for people that haven't had those experiences. So what you're doing, guys, when you're looking at roles such as this, is you're looking at, what is it in my current skill set? What is it in my current experiences? What is it in the work that I've done, the work that is coming up that speaks to this job description? It's impossible for any one person to tick off all these boxes. These ones here, don't worry about ticking everything off. There's so many studies around people, especially females, who will disqualify themselves from a role because they think they needed to fill 90% of the job description. No, you don't. You don't have to. I would say at least 50 or 60% should be good enough, right? And you also remember that when we are writing our job descriptions, especially a job description like this, it doesn't, like if I say resolving clients' queries, Marilyn there with her au pairing experience, Marilyn, you will have to find a way to articulate that you're actually really good with managing different stakeholders, different kinds of clients, and explaining maybe difficult concepts to them in a way that is quite simple. That's Marilyn on this point. In fact, even on point about understanding customer demands, providing appropriate solutions. Of course, Marilyn won't just talk about the children here. She'll also talk about managing the agency. She'll also talk about managing the parents, managing a school, especially if you did it for 10 years, managing, you're probably also working with the school to some extent, or at least communicating with the school, right? Building strong communication and service skills. To the person who spoke about they running their own business. Again, this is your take. Full chain of banking. If you've worked in banking, even if you obviously have not worked the full chain of banking, but if you've worked, let's say you worked as I'm going to use another bank. So you were at Capitec, but you were in their they call them customer service. They have a specific really cool title for them, but it's the people that work in the banks. And they take lots of graduates for that. Lots of graduates. They take it down to Stellenbosch, they train you, etc. If you've worked in that role and you had an understanding of how does the full business cycle of the bank work, that's it. That's your take. You don't need to have worked within the corporate aspect of it for you to say, I now qualify for this role. I'm just looking at the really simple, straightforward things on this JD, guys. Building relationships. Again, I'm just going to use you again just because I'm still on these questions here. The building relationships, whether you were volunteering or the like, you're building relationships, you're developing a network, no matter where you go. And then finally, cover letter. Let me quickly jump into that. Cover letter, please, no longer than a 1 page. In fact, if it can be 2 or 3 paragraphs, that's fine. But it's so important. Fields of study. Yes, it's important, Jabulile, but it depends on what you're applying for. So if you're applying for this learnership here, they tell you what fields of study they require. And if they're looking for this, then if you're not in these areas of study, a field of study, then this is not for you. So what you're going to do is you're going to look for other roles. I just want to use it, just using my profile as example. So I'm obviously in HR. If I go to jobs, no, let's go back to stand up. In fact, let me go to my own employer, right? Baker McKinsey. Look at what it does, guys. Automatically, other than this first role, almost all the roles that it picks up for me, almost all the roles that it picks up for me are HR roles, right? If I go, let's go back home. Let's go to jobs. It will automatically always find me roles that are HR related roles. There's a reason why it does that. It's because it's picked up from my title what it is that I do. It's picked up from my role what is it that I do, and it's going to do the same for you. And that's why it's so important for you to pay attention to what it is that you've put on your LinkedIn profile. Please don't take that for granted, because it helps you find opportunities based on what it is that you've said about yourself insofar as your current role is concerned, as well as the roles that you're then looking for. So please, I cannot stress this enough. Pay attention to that. And in fact, even Biz Community, Career Junction, PNet, Indeed, etc., they all do the same thing. They ask you to filter and tell it, what are you looking for? But they 100% also pick up from what it is that you say you're doing. Okay. And then just this point around within the screening process, if you're really nervous, and I think that was a question that was also asked earlier, you've sent your CV all over the place, nobody's coming back to you, follow up. You lose nothing by making a call and just asking, did anyone receive this? Who received it? Do they have any roles? Are they able to get back to you? Sometimes people aren't recruiting, and so especially if you're handing in a physical CV, it just may get put aside. But what you want to do when you when you follow up a few weeks down the line or a few days down the line, is you want to just highlight to this person that I'm serious about coming into your organization, and I'm serious about being top of your mind when there are roles that are available. Okay. There's a comment here that I missed by Butomi saying that when you put down your business, it can impact your chances of being shortlisted. Yes, it depends though on the relevance, and it not necessarily the relevance with Tommy. I think it's relevance in relation to um maybe if it's a direct kind of competition. But even then, if you run your own business, there's so many people that are running their own business now, whether it's side hustle, consulting, etc. If somebody is now saying, I want to go into an organization for whatever reason, on a contract role, on a permanent role, the person that's recruiting on the other end is unlikely to say, hey, because you're running your own business, it means that you can't work with us. No. All they're interested in is how are the skills aligned, and what does that then mean in terms of how you're going to impact the role? What kind of value are you going to then bring into the business? So those transferable skills, like you've mentioned here, leadership management, problem solving, but also even other things like just communication, team working, engagement with clients and the like, assuming you're going to be doing some of that. Okay. Okay, so let's move over to maybe interview prep. Just focusing still on our funnel. And to Tabiso's question, even if you have limited qualifications, you're working right now towards a qualification with Unisa. So you mentioned that's what's been sitting in your education section. And then in terms of potential skills, if you think there are potential skills, then I will assume that you are working on them. You can't tell us about a skill that doesn't exist yet. You can't tell us that you're going to have it. Because also you're not sure if you really are going to have it. What you want to show us is that you're working towards that skill, or you're currently developing it rather. Okay. And then what can you do for more qualifications and skills? Like all your peers on this chat have been showing, you do the work, right? Whether it's volunteer work, whether it's work that doesn't necessarily always seem aligned, what you are definitely building is a skill set. So coming into the interview prep, there are different types of interviews. So yes, there are your behavioral, your technical, as well as your panel. Don't forget also about video interviews. That's also becoming a little bit more prevalent. So again, on maybe just quickly touching on video interviews. Video interviews also within an ATS also pick up a lot around keywords. How confident are you in your responses? And it can be relatively easy to prep for an interview because there are always going to be a standard set of questions. So like, tell us about yourself. Why this company? Why this organization? Why this role? Why you? Those 4 questions are almost standard. You almost can't get away from those questions. And the more you practice them, the more comfortable you get with answering those questions, even if you're completely nervous, even if you think I'm not necessarily the strongest person for this role. Still practice basically articulating that story, and the story being what you've put in your CV, what you've put in your cover letter. And remember what I said, guys, when it's a role at a employer that you want, you would have done a little bit more research than the average. And even if it's not necessarily your ideal employer, once you get called for an interview, even if it's the day before, you're going to quickly go online and research that company. And if you can, you'll reach out to 1 or 2 people that work at that company and ask, hey, I just want to get a little bit more information on your company. I'm interested in it. Maybe have an interview in a few days or tomorrow. Are you able to give me any pointers or just explain a little bit around what your role does? Absolutely nothing wrong with that. I promise you that's not cheating. That's part of your research, right? So practice for that. Practice your common questions. Prepare, and also prepare your own questions in advance. And in your own questions, I would probably say the only question I think one should never, ever, ever ask in an interview. Please never ask, what could I have done better in this interview? Is there anything in my interview that, or anything in my documents that you guys don't understand and you'd like for me to clarify on? Don't do that. Please, I cannot stress that. Don't do that. And the reason why you don't want to do that, you don't want to draw attention to the things that you don't have right at the end of the interview. You don't want them to think, this person is really great. I really enjoyed this person. And now you're asking them, tell me what I didn't do, or what I could have done better. And then for them to go, actually, you would have been stronger if you did A, B, and C. You don't want to plant that seed. Does that make sense? You don't want to be the person that said, doubt me. Because you're already in the room. You've already made it this far. Your role in the interview was to confirm everything that you've already submitted. They may ask you questions that are about what's already in your CV. They may ask you technical stuff, especially if it's a very technical role. Anything that they ask you based on your CV. So if we go back to like David's example, David, your experience is varied. So even if you are now, at let's say an IT firm, but they ask you about construction, you can't sit there like you don't understand what happens at a construction site. And if you suddenly can't in an interview, that makes us question, was this person learning? Were they actually paying attention in their role, in the job that they did, even if it wasn't their ideal job? Because in doing that, in showing that you weren't necessarily learning or picking anything up in your own engagements, in your own experience, it makes a potential employer question, what will happen if you are in the role and the aspects of your role that you don't enjoy? There are people that you don't enjoy interacting with. How will you manage that? Those are the things that, again, if we're touching on skills, those are the things that you've learned through your experiences. And so if you're coming into an interview and you want to start touching on the things that you're not good at, then no. Maybe just another tip on interviews. If we ask you, what are your weaknesses or your areas of development, you want to frame them as things that you obviously are aware of because you've done your reflection, but you are already working on through. Yeah, so if you say, I noticed during the course of my studies that I was a procrastinator. I seem to have a preference for being put under pressure and working under pressure. Let's say studying under pressure. You want to reframe that into, but now in my second semester, even though I maybe did relatively well in my first semester, I realize now that I could probably do a lot better if I'm not put under pressure, and I can then focus on getting that work out earlier, studying, assisting my peers, learning better through teaching, and then curbing my issue of procrastination. That's a simple, nice example. Not something like I'm a perfectionist, but my transcript doesn't necessarily reflect that because I'm panicking about getting the work right. No. You don't want to do that to yourself. You don't want to do that to yourself because, again, you remember that you're interviewing for a role. And in the interview, we're trying to see what you potentially will be like in that role. So when you are highlighting things like, I struggle to work with other people because, I'm a remote-based student. I don't really have to interact with a lot of people, so I work quite independently. But this role and the job description has been very clear that the people work in teams. You want to then say, yes, my experience has been quite independent in terms of my learning and my working style, However, I've appreciated opportunities to work in teams as and when they're given to me, because I, I learned from people with different backgrounds, and I then have a different view or perception of things, even of the things that I thought I was really good at. Okay. Yeah, so maybe just pausing here. I see also a few more questions, and I am mindful of time. I know we're running out, but let me just ask, what are some of the toughest kind of interview questions you guys have faced? And then let's see if we can try to tackle them together. Um, let's say here, you can ask, I'm a first year applying for an internship. Do I put leadership roles and selected achievements on my CV from high school? Yes, and again, because you're in your first year, you can do that, but be mindful, maybe not too many, so maybe just from like grade 10. You don't want anything from primary, unless you're like in grade 7, I was junior city council. I was on the junior city council, and then that's it. You don't need to be like, now I was, yeah. So basically, maybe from like grade 10 to matric, only because you're first year. If you're a third or fourth year student, your achievements don't need to be long in relation to high school. You could probably put 1 or 2, because basically what you're trying to show is you've had leadership skills and been developing your leadership skills from an early age. Okay, Marilyn applied for a role with a very low salary, social NGO. How do I answer question 3 and 2? Why am I leaving my current job? No, I think, Marion, what you don't want to do, you don't want to say you're leaving for a higher salary. You can say, I'm looking for better work opportunities. I need to be stretched further. I need to be stretched, better work opportunities. I'm looking for, yeah. And because what will happen is, chances are you will get asked anyway, what is your salary expectation? And then you can give a salary range, and then I would hope that you've done some research in terms of what would be a market related or a fair salary band. And then they may then ask if if you're willing to negotiate on that. And I would like to think that everyone should say yes. You're open to negotiation, but it must make sense. I think it's we know that there are some employers that offer very, very low salaries. And I think sometimes what you want to do is then pay attention to at least be able to explain, this would be my kind of expense sheet. Please, not the details of it. Because remember, your employer isn't asking you, like, what do you have to do with your money? What you want to do is say, for example, if you're going to pay me 10,000, but you're still also going to tax it. And so my take home is 6 or 7. But on transport, I've calculated that I'm going to need 4,000, and I still need to pay rent, buy food, probably pay a little bit to my studies, etc. Then can we negotiate for at least about a 12 or a 14, so that the take home is at least 10? So you want to play around with that a little bit. Show that you've also really seriously considered it. Having said that, and especially if it's an internship, sometimes it's quite difficult, because the amount is the amount and it's not negotiable. And then it's up to you to figure out, how do you want to manage that? Do you want to take the experience and the low salary, and then be looking for another role whilst you're in that? Then maybe that's what you do. Okay. Which career path can I pursue? Jabalili, there, I 100% encourage you to speak to your professors. You guys have the leadership school, the Thabo Mbeki political leadership school. Reach out to them, and look at what are some of the roles that you can go into. Look at DIRCO, so Department of International Relations. What are some of the roles that they have? There's so many options with the BA in political in politics, whether it's leadership and citizenship, and of course the NGO space. Oh, okay. Why must we hire you? Yes, that's a typical question. Tell us about yourself. Guys, I promise you, please, these are not questions that you should struggle with. Tell me about yourself, Garabo. Like, who are you? So what I like to do in my interviews, even when I ask a question, I usually will say, hi, Garabo. So it's a pleasure to have you here. Tell me about yourself. So for example, 'cause we're a law firm, so I'll ask, why did you decide to study law? A little bit on your background and why you're interested in our role. If you do that for yourself, if you say, okay, cool, in a quick paragraph, how do I tell somebody a little bit on my background? Is my background and relevant to what I think an employer should know about me? So not your whole story, just a very quick synopsis of, I'm Garabo, I'm a driven person, energetic, high learning agility, etc. I studied, I'm going to use this person's one, this one. I studied a BA in political leadership and citizenship, citizenship because, you know, I love my country, and I think that I would love to contribute in the political space of the country and to show that there's a different type of leader, a young leader that can be in politics. As you've seen recently, we have younger ministers, etc. Like, there's so many ways that you like play with the question without it being intimidating and without it being a lie, right? You're just telling us what you've put on that cover letter, what you put on that CV. Why must we hire you, Ndlovu? You're talking about why you think you are the best, right? And remember, you have nothing to compare it to. You don't know what Karabo, what Mpolisi, and what Brown are bringing to the table. You only know what you're bringing to the table. Hire me because of these skills, whatever the skills are. Hire me because I have a passion for this industry. Hire me because I will, I'm an implementer. I lead with a focus. I work towards tangible results, whether it's been the team or the work that we do. Hire me because I build teams through consensus. Hire me because I'm a creative thinker. Hire me because I I'm creative, and this company is unique in industry. Is number one in industry for top employers in that space, etc. Like, keep connecting dots for them. Keep connecting dots for them. And again, the more you practice that little speech. Think of it as your elevator speech. The more you practice it, the easier it is to say it in front of a group of strangers. Like, I know, like, sometimes candidates will panic because you have a Teams interview like we're doing now. And so maybe the person's video is off. So you're unable to read the room. You don't know if that person is busy, if they're actually paying attention or not. Or you're in a panel interview. There's, like 3 or 4 or 5 people in the room. Some of them are on their laptops. So your question, are they really paying attention? But if you've practiced your speech, you know what you have to say, and you know how to then put it out there confidently so that you can then engage in a question. Where do you see yourself in 3 years? That's a relatively easy one, because it's asking you, what goals are you setting for yourself? How would you like to grow? Salary expectations for your first job, it depends on the role, it depends on the industry. Sometimes you don't really have a salary expectation. You might just be like, you can say, I figured out or calculated that my expenses are at around this amount, and so I'd like my salary to be able to comfortably meet that. And then hopefully they far exceed your expectations. Okay. The question from Megan, Lisa, I think it's for you guys. I'm going to skip that one. How do you get involved with Unisa DCCD? Yes, yeah. So thing you at 40 years old, you may not necessarily apply for internships because some of them are specifically there's a specific age requirement. So in your case, you're then looking you're looking for either entry roles, actually not entry roles, it just depends on your work experience to date. So if you're starting over so if you're pivoting into a new career, then you may have to start at entry level, but not necessarily internships. And again, it also then depends on your industry. There's certain organizations, so nonprofits that don't have an issue around age. So you may be able to get into an internship irrespective of age or previous experience. Faith, that question is not, it's not for us here, but if you're a leader in the workplace, how would you motivate your colleagues? Really just understand your people. What drives them? Why are they at work? Why are they here? And how do they understand their role in relation to yours? And, how do you guys communicate as a team? So as a team, but also on a larger basis as an organization. Okay. Can I answer a question in my home language? Sometimes only because we don't understand questions in English. So it depends, WLA. If they're only speaking in English and only understand in English, what you can do, and I have this quite often, you can just keep asking them to rephrase. And you can say, I don't fully understand the question. They may rephrase it. And in instances where you can answer in your vernacular language and your interviewer will be able to understand, then do so. Again, I've also had interviews where I've said to people, actually, let's drop the English, like, "Kuluma nam," or let me hear what you actually want to say. And finally enough, I find that sometimes when a person is very nervous and is very nervous about how they're articulating in English, then their home language will inevitably come out in the interview. So there'll always be like a little word or a quip that gets thrown in. And I find that sometimes people don't even realize that they've just said something in vernac. Could be something as simple as ageri, which means it's almost like a confirmation of, okay, do you understand? So yeah, it happens, but it just depends on it honestly depends on your interviewer, if they'll be able to understand what it is that you're trying to say. But yes, what you want to think about, Jabil, is if you're struggling in the language, what does it then mean for the role? Is there an expectation in the role to always be speaking English? And if not, then you should be able to get away with speaking in your home language. Okay, quickly wrapping up. I see I've got 7 minutes. Interview to offer, just another section. Post-interview, if possible, send a thank you mail or a call. Just trying to make sure that you're top of mind. Reflect on your own performance. What is it that you could have done differently or better? Again, you're not asking them to tell you that. If they decline you after this, then you can maybe ask on feedback. But I think also, just like with the rejections in the screening stage, it can be difficult to get that feedback because sometimes there's nothing you've done wrong. There was just another candidate who was stronger for that role at the time. Okay. We've spoken a lot about packages, so I won't touch on those points, but negotiating salaries is a skill set. If you haven't had to negotiate, read up on it. There's lots of information available online on how you can respectfully negotiate. I think key to negotiation is understanding your requirements and understanding what the market looks like. Because yes, many a time people will say to you, it's market related. It will be put on a job post. It's 90% of the time, HR is not trying to undercut people. It's simply not true. We're not trying to undercut people by saying, oh, if you earn 4,000, but this role is 10,000, we're going to give you 6,000 instead of giving you 8,000 or 10,000. No, quite often it's not that. Yes, there's an element of it because obviously a salary is an expense line to a business, but when you are qualified for the role as it exists, and you've got an HR that understands what it's doing, they will offer you the amount that is specified, the amount that they've actually budgeted for. So do your research, and I think this is why you want to try to ask people in the industry, maybe in the company, just look at research surveys that have been done. Just try to get a sense. Okay. Yeah, Hazel, remove all those long list of modules. I promise you guys, you're just taking up unnecessary space. A one-page CV is perfectly fine. A CV doesn't need to be 2 or 3 or 4 pages. 1 page is perfectly fine. Okay, and then obviously also think about growth opportunities. Sometimes your growth opportunities are not necessarily monetary. And this is somebody asked around that they struggled with the question around where do you see yourself in 3 years? But growth opportunities talks to where do you see yourself going? You may not, in some roles, in some organizations, there may not necessarily be a possibility of promotions, but there would be a possibility of stretch projects, stretch opportunities. So how else can you grow without necessarily changing your title? Yeah, and how else can you grow that will also then hopefully also add to your salary base in the long term? Because money does matter, and you want to be able to keep growing, not just your skill set, but also your pocket, right? Or your bank balance. Okay, what are good points to make in your performance reflection? Strengths, skills, areas of development that you want to work on, growth opportunities that you've highlighted. Those are some of the things that you want to highlight in your performance reflection. Building, and then finally, maybe for today, yeah, polish your LinkedIn profile if you haven't. Polish your CV. Polish your CV. I think probably more than LinkedIn. Polish that CV. If you're applying through any of the search engines that we mentioned earlier, you're putting out a CV, and you want the CV to it does speak for you, but you want it to speak for you in a way that gets you into the next step. If you're on LinkedIn, engage, because engagement is how you spread your network, and quite often the network will help you access opportunity that you may have otherwise missed. So starting with who you know and then moving up from there, attend events such as this, reach out professionally where possible for assistance, reach out to your career services team, and then follow up, reach out also to potential employers, potential colleagues, and then follow up as much as possible. I don't know which company you're talking about. I didn't get that. I'd like to. I've been struggling. Maybe Singer, just if you can quickly just pop in the chat, which company name are you struggling with? And then to close off on my side, guys, stay proactive, not reactive. The clients, the rejection, I know it's part of the journey. It's difficult. It can be heartbreaking, but hopefully as you keep going, you'll get the role that you're looking for. Stay resilient. It is part of the journey. Build your personal brand, build your skill sets, build your confidence. Actually, you're building your confidence. You're building your ability to say, this is who I am. This is what I potentially bring to the table. The right employer will absolutely appreciate that. And it does take a while sometimes to get the right employer. Oh, I didn't give a name for you. I was just saying NGOs as well. I said you can look at NGOs, so nonprofit organizations. That's what I said. You can also look at nonprofit organizations for internship roles. That's what I was saying. Okay, and just like that, we've come to the end of my session with you. So quick, so quick. If you want to reach out, I am available on LinkedIn, as I mentioned last week. I don't always respond very quickly, but I eventually do get to my messages and respond to people. So also, just have some heart and a little bit of patience if you're reaching out to me for some assistance. Lisa, I hand back over to you. I'd like to think I tackled as many of the questions as I could there.
You have people, we have now run out of time, but I'm wondering just for a few minutes, if you could just comment on the role of the references, and also just some aspects to pay attention to. For example, somebody mentioned that the previous, manager they worked for weren't that nice to them. There was conflict and so on. So what do you do in that situation? And then also as a student, maybe you've you left school, you started studying, so you don't have formal work experience. If you are asked for referees, how do you negotiate those? What do you do in that situation?
In an ideal world, thanks, Lisa. In an ideal world, everyone's reference is willing and able to provide a really good reference for you. So let's start with the first part. So references, people that you worked with, people that can speak to your character, people that can confirm that you've done the studies that you said you have, or can confirm that you've done the work in the organization that you did. It doesn't always have to be your line manager, especially when you are still in process. So for example, on my side, I do reference checks just before we make final offers. So it's not practical to then reach out to your current employer. We may reach out to a previous employer. Legal is also notoriously small, surprisingly. If you've worked in certain type of law firms, then chances are everyone kind of knows everyone. So quite often we'll have our candidates say, yes, I know we're at the final stages, but if possible, can a reference be followed up with after I've accepted the offer? But then it's clear that the acceptance and the ability to start is conditional on us confirming the reference. If you're still worried about maybe you didn't necessarily have a strong relationship with your employer or your direct reporting line, then HR should be able to help you. So references actually, best practice of references, we're not necessarily asking people to tell us your qualities. Quite often you can be doing a reference just to check that that person actually did work there for whatever time that they said they did. That's best practice, because sometimes what happens is an employer might recognize that this organization was not the right one for you, or the team that you were in wasn't the healthiest for you, and so it makes sense that you've left, but they don't want to speak badly of their current employees, and so we might say, listen, this person, we don't also want to give too much information on how they work. What we're happy to do is say they did in fact work here. Good enough. If you're a student wanting then references, people to speak well for you, reach out to your lecturers. If you're volunteering, but basically you reach out to anyone that is considered an authority figure, so not necessarily a friend, and have that person ideally on paper pen something down to talk about your attributes, how they've known you, or how they know you, and how they found working with you or engaging with you. And if I touch, there were, I think, two examples. I think it was Marilyn, who I gave as an example. Marilyn was the one who said she's done au pairing. Marilyn for me must have like amazing references if she did that for 10 years. And she has different references, whether it's the parents, whether, like I said, it's an agency, and to an extent, maybe even the kids that she looked after, if some of them are now old enough to write something about how she was with them. And then There was another lady who touched on, she has only really done volunteering work. If there was a senior person within that organization, you have them write a reference. I just want to give just one last point on references. Please be prepared. I have experienced this quite a bit, where sometimes a reference will say to you, please draft the first round of the reference. So what is it you want me to say? And then send it back to me, and then I'll clean it up, add my own flavor, and then sign off. And that now goes back to the why you, and goes back to your own self-reflection. It even goes back to the point that somebody asked about, what do I write in my evaluation? It's how do you articulate what is it that you're really good at? In fact, remember, in a reference, we're not talking about areas for development. What are you really good at? What is the experience that you've had, and how does it then tie in with the work that you're not looking for? So also be prepped for, if somebody says to you, I'm happy to do your reference, but what is it that you want me to do? Or even, what do you want me to say? If I get a call from Repelo and she says, Sonwaliso wants to work with you guys, what do I say? Then tell that person, I've applied for this role at we use Standard Bank. I applied for this role at Standard Bank. I've got experience in banking, because sometimes you're asking people to do references and they don't actually know your experience. So you want to also then give them a few pointers so that what they're saying is aligned to the role that you're applying for.
Thank you so much, Pupulu, again for sharing your infinite wisdom and expertise with us. We really appreciate your engagement also in answering all the questions. If you still have questions after the session, you're welcome, either to go and watch the recording if you maybe missed out on something, or then just drop us an email to counselling@unisa.ac.za so that we can also see how to support you. I've posted a couple of resources that I thought about as we looked at the questions. So there's a document that you can use to do a CV self-assessment. So just some questions that you can take a look, or checklist that you can use before you then ask somebody else to maybe check your CV. Then also, Boipelo, you highlighted quite importantly the different phases of the recruitment process, how we can prepare effectively for each of those phases. So again, from our side, thank you so much for sharing that with us. And also thank you to all of you who have joined us this afternoon. We know that you have a lot of other competing responsibilities and things that you would need to spend your time on. So we really appreciate you making the time to be here this afternoon. And we sincerely hope that it's not the last time that you see us or that we see you. And we wish you all the best with your studies. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Lisa. Good luck, everyone.